the camera. Give it off, down.
Greetings, horror junkies, and finally, welcome to another edition of Remake Rematch here on Screen.com. I mean, seriously, when was the last time we even did one of these? It was like 1984 or something. But as it happens, this week afforded us the perfect opportunity to do another one of these, and ye shall reap the benefits. This week marks the DVD release of A Nightmare on Elm Street, the 2010 remake of the Wes Craven 80s horror classic featuring that great comedian among burn victims, Freddy Krueger. Now, I'll be the first to tell you that the remake is not an overly effective horror flick, but there are some things that it manages to do a wee bit better than its forebear. So we thought it would be fun to put these two movies together, original and remake, and see which one comes out on top as the supreme lord of all things Krueger. Movies? Let the battle begin. Both iterations of A Nightmare on Elm Street tell effectively the same story. A group of teenagers in suburban Ohio discover that they've been having similar nightmares about a burned man with a hat and a hand made of knives.
Nancy, you dreamed about the same creep I did.
How can everyone be having the same dream, you ask?
That's impossible.
Because that burned man is actually a serial killer named Freddy Krueger, whose supernatural powers allow him to enter the dreams of his victims.
Did you have any weird dreams last night?
In this case, his victims are the children of Elm Street, because the parents of those children long ago captured and burned Freddy alive after it was discovered that he'd been hurting various children in the neighborhood. Now, the movies differ just slightly in terms of Freddy's backstory. The original movie paints Freddy as a straight-up child murderer, while the remake gets a little skeezier, alluding more to a sort of molesting and abusing Freddy.
Little Nancy.
By and large, though, the two movies stick to a similar script, with most of the same principal characters, even a few specific deaths mimicked in the remake. The movie's original quartet of Nancy, Glenn, Tina, and Rod were exactly the kind of teenagers you'd expect to be stalked by a murderous movie monster. They like to party. They like to have sex. And they could scream real good. It helps that the cast all pretty much fit their roles perfectly. Heather Langenkamp was one of those perfect horror movie heroines, and having Johnny Depp, albeit a very young and inexperienced version of him, on board really added a bizarrely high caliber level of talent to the proceedings. Watching these kids get dispatched by Freddy's various antics is always an entertaining prospect. On the flip side, the kids on the center of the Nightmare remake are anything but the party-hardy type. Rooney Mara's version of Nancy is really nothing short of downtrodden, as are the bulk of the kids here.
You have no idea what I've seen.
By the time the movie opens, we're already treated to some crazed, sleep-deprived teenagers who simply aren't that much fun to watch. Hell, even the illicit sexual overtones of the original kids are pretty much, well, gone here. I mean, I don't know, watching this girl get ceiling murdered here, as opposed to in the first movie, where she had just previously engaged in a bunch of hysterically loud sex. I don't know, it just feels wrong without that. Now, while the answer to this question might seem obvious, the truth is that Freddy Krueger, as played by Robert Englund, is just simply a much different animal than the one played by Jackie Earle Haley. Englund's Freddy is the classic movie monster, a murderous imp of a man with a dark past, scarred body, and unique method of dispatching his foes via his bladed glove. But what set Englund apart is his penchant for macabre comedy. His one-liners, especially in later sequels, became such an important part of the character, and Englund simply grew the role from movie to movie to such a larger-than-life character that it's really tough to imagine anyone else in the role. That said, there is someone else in the role in this remake, and that is Haley. Haley's performance is hardly a bad one. If there's any real difference here, it's just the writing, with Haley's Freddy being a little less definitively funny, shall we say, and more actively sadistic.
Wake up! You're bleeding.
He's far more ghoulish and in some ways a bit scarier of a character. I mean, for instance, just listen to the way he talks to this kid he's just removed from this mortal coil.
Did you know that after the heart stops beating, the brain keeps functioning for well over 7 minutes? We got 6 more minutes to play.
But that said, nothing about Haley's portrayal of Freddy feels particularly iconic. He just sort of slinks through the movie, murdering these morose kids and occasionally spouting a lackluster one-liner just for shits and giggles.
How about we hang first?
While I think Haley makes an admirable attempt here, it feels like to call this one for anyone other than Englund would just be straight up travesty. The dude is Freddy Krueger. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Undoubtedly, the remake special effects are light years ahead of anything you'll find in the 1984 original. But in terms of sheer cheesy creativity, the original movie might still hold a bit more sway. For instance, take both the scenes featuring a girl being gravitationally pulled to the ceiling from her bed only to be brutally slaughtered. While the effects in the remake are far more brutal, there's just something so intrinsically cool about the way the original death scene was shot and put together. It's just, quite frankly, scarier. Also, straight up, the remake offers no death scene more hilarious than this one featuring Johnny Depp. That said, there are a couple of good shockers in the remake, including this little bit of grossness in the movie's opening scene. All things considered, though, I'm giving this one to the original. The first movie just laid down so many unique concepts of what horror movie death could be, that antiquated as its effects might be, I still feel like just straight up prefer watching these kids die versus the newbies. Now, I have never felt like the original Nightmare on Elm Street's ending was its strongest quality. By the time the teenager's been whittled down to Nancy and she starts working her plan to capture Freddy by pulling him out of her dream and then outfitting her house like a French-Canadian badger trapper in order to take him down, the pace of the movie slows down exponentially, and Nancy's final encounter with Freddy doesn't really end with much of a bang, so much as kind of a whimper. The new Nightmare does a better job of setting up a creepy location for its end battle, with Nancy and her man-friend neck-deep inside Freddy's former hideout of child-oriented unpleasantness. The same notion of bringing Freddy out of the dream takes place in the remake, but the final battle feels a lot more frenetic and immediate, and concludes with a markedly more satisfying end to Freddy.
It hurts, doesn't it? It's because you're in my world now, bitch.
That said, pretty torn on which of the twist ending deaths I like better.
I'm just glad you're safe.
While the remake of A Nightmare on Elm Street does manage to do a few things well, it simply feels like a pale retread of what came before it. Wes Craven's original vision, primitive as it may seem now, was a straight-up masterpiece of horror filmmaking for its time. Sure, it seems a little goofy when you watch it now, but that's sort of the thing. It's still an eminently watchable movie filled with memorable scenes and characters that stick with you long after the film is over. The remake? Sorry, not so much. In this battle, the winner is undoubtedly the original Nightmare on Elm Street.